Welcome back to another Agenty Digital podcast. Today I'm joined by Angel Smith, the president of Virtru. Angel, it's great to have you here today.
It's nice to meet you. Thank you so much.
So, for listeners that don't know Angel Smith, who is she and what does she do?
So I was a Marine for about 23 years. I started out enlisted and I was a communications technician. So I worked on radios and things like that for aircraft and desk vans, like kind of like the air control vans. And then I became a pilot. I flew C-130s for the Marine Corps and I retired in 2016 and I went over to Capitol Hill for a few years. I worked on the military intelligence portfolio there. I was working with the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Then I went over to Microsoft for about 8 years. I worked I started out over in the government affairs division and then moved over to mission engineering. And after mission engineering, I ended up moving into their global defense team. And while I was there just this last January, I was asked to come over to work at Virtru. And as the more I became more familiar with the product, the more I was like, oh my God, this solves so many problems, so many mission problems across the entire department. And so I jumped on the opportunity to come over to Virtru. So yeah, so that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And can you recall something that you learned from the days that you were flying that maybe transferred into business in
Yeah.
some shape or form?
Yeah, for sure. Especially on the tech side. I was the type of platform that I flew C-130s and we were all over the world all the time. And when you would leave outside of your base and station, you really had to kind of figure out like the communication, the technology. You had to figure out a lot of things on your own. And we were often working with international forces. We were often working in disconnected environments and things like that. And because of that, it really makes your life orders of magnitude more difficult. And the other thing too is that you start to figure out, you start to do whatever you've got to do to get the mission accomplished. And that's super informing. I used to listen to a gentleman named a really good friend of mine. His name is Dave Abba. He's a retired Major General out of the Air Force, and he tells this really interesting story about F-35 pilots from two different countries, and they were the U.S. and I think Norway is the example he was using, and they were essentially using WhatsApp to do mission planning on this like the most sophisticated aircraft on the planet, but they're using WhatsApp because that's the best that they had, and like
Uh-huh.
that. As much as people kind of start to throw stones at them for that, it's actually kind of like, well, this is not their fault. We have done this to them. Like they don't have the technology that they actually need, that is in a lot of cases more readily available and commercial. But we've
Mm-hmm.
put the people that fight wars for us across the entire world at a technological disadvantage, just because it's mostly a trust problem more than anything else. Which is disappointing. But this is one of the things that I saw so much benefit out of a company like Virtru, that I left my amazing job at Microsoft working around amazing people to come to this, small startup, because it was like, oh my God, this is transformational. So yeah, so I don't know if
Mm.
that's helpful, but yeah.
Yeah. And so what does Virtue do for people that are unaware of what does Virtue do?
Yeah,
What
so
are you best at?
Virtru is a data-centric security company. So kind of at a high level, the way you should think about it is, typically the way that you protect data is perimeter security. So, think about, people always put up firewalls and, things that surround data in a specific environment. Virtru believes that as a company, we believe that's insufficient. And you have to actually, perimeter security is important, but protecting the data independently, every single data object within every environment is equally as important. Like we've got to protect every single data object, because every single data object, you have to assume that your perimeter has already been breached and you've got some type of a bad actor tootling around in your space, if you assume that, then you change your posture. And as an example that I like to use is, let's pretend that you've got a thief that you know is living in your house and walking around. You can't see them, but you know that they're there. And they're just going to slowly start to like pick off things inside your home. What would you do differently with all of your valuables if you knew that there was somebody in your house looking for them? Would you behave differently if you knew they were? That's kind of the perspective that we have, is we are assuming we have a thief in the house and we are protecting every single piece of data, um, in order to be able
Hmm.
to make sure that we're protecting the most valuable pieces of data that we've got. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I found interesting about Virtru is that you built TDF as an open standard,
Yeah.
and then you actually open sourced it, right? And so I feel like in a space where everyone does proprietary lock-in, it's different. So why Virtru gave away the standard?
Yeah, so to answer that question, we have to kind of go back and do a little bit of historical discussions about where Virtru was at a few years ago. And so when Virtru first started, well, actually, go back to 9/11 as an example. So the two founders of the company are brothers, John Ackerley and Will Ackerley. Both of those brothers, one of them, John Ackerley, worked over in the White House on the policy front, and then Will Ackerley, who is a 1,000-pound brain, was working over the NSA. And they both saw 9/11 and the problem from kind of two different sides of the same wall. And it became very, very clear to both of them. The great tragedy of 9/11 was that all of the information and data that we could have stopped that attack from happening, we had all of it as a nation. We had all of it. But there was no meaningful way for us to be able to get access to it. And so, Will and John, both of them working inside the administration and inside the intelligence community at the time, both of them saw this as a problem that was super correctable with the right technological solution. Because the bottom line was, is like, to go back to the trust discussion, the trust comment from earlier, this is a trust problem. These are a bunch of agencies inside of our own government, and then if you can magnify that across the entire world, it's we have data in so many different ways is actually the most valuable resource that most of us have. Just openly sharing a lot of that information is just, it's a difficult thing to kind of let go of. And so the theory was, if we could create a software solution that created trust around every single piece of data, that secured every single piece of data, and then you could use ABAC controls on both sides of the data and the user front, you could fundamentally change the way that we used and share data across the board. You could change everything. You could get everybody to share more, especially if they had a level of confidence in knowing that who you give it to is exactly who you expected it to have. And then another, component of it that I think we learned the hard way with leaking. Leaking is an interesting problem, and I'm going to bring up, this is probably a little bit controversial, but when you think about something like Snowden, part of the Snowden problem wasn't necessarily that he stole so much intelligence. It was that he took a lot, and we don't completely and fully understand exactly what he took. So that's
Hmm.
a whole nother set of problems. You've got this one problem essentially saying, like, look, I need to protect my data, at least creating some type of a mechanism that would maybe create a deterrent. The second component of it that's incredibly important is being able to have an auditable log and trace of everything that particular individual has ever accessed, anywhere it went. And then in some cases, in the time of AI, let's say that hypothetically, I'm going to introduce kind of a different concept. Um, in the time of AI, one of the things I tell people pretty regularly is we're very, very focused on exfil of data as the greatest threat. I think we should pay attention to infill of data. And when you think about large language models, it's a crap in, crap out scenario. So if
Hmm.
I was a bad guy, I'd probably be less concerned about taking and more concerned, more motivated to add garbage into the system. So that way I would throw off all of your results and everything that's coming out of an LLM or whatever, AI model that you're using. I can skew your results and create really, really, really unorthodox responses based off of whatever type of data that I've been able to manipulate. So I think that there's a couple of different components of it that kind of got them started, and where we find ourselves today is in a completely different place where they were at when they started the company I think 15, 16 years ago. Now we've got LLMs, and what we're seeing is that if you take a data centric approach, it you have as much control in the LLM and AI space as you did when we didn't have it. But you have to be motivated at the data layer. You can't the
Hmm.
perimeters. I'm not going to say that perimeter security is dead, because perimeter security is 100% a component, but you have to have both if you really want to be able to survive, I think, in today's as technology is starting to just absolutely escalate in how quickly it's starting to come out. We have to have a completely different perspective on how we're protecting things.
Hmm. How do you use AI in Virtru specifically?
Yeah, so we have a couple of things. So when I know I had mentioned just a second ago ABAC controls. So it's specific access for a particular piece of data. So you're giving an attribute to data and an attribute from every single person that might actually access the data. If the data doesn't have an attribute and you don't have an attribute that gives you access, then that data can't be utilized. And so we've built a capability that would essentially, if you ABAC or you TDF'd every single piece of data, it has to be TDF before it can be used by an LLM. So a TDF is trusted data format. So we essentially say wrap everything that you possibly have. And if you wrap it, then you know that it's valid. So when it goes into any type of an AI engine, you have certainty that you're not pulling a bunch of crap in and getting an output that you're not aware of. And this is especially important when I hear a lot of people go, yeah, but you have that same control if you're just allowing people to pull using an LLM in their isolated environment. Well, what you're assuming is that you have no adversaries in that environment. If you take a completely different perspective and you go to the data layer, and the only confidence you actually have is that every single piece of data inside that environment is actually uh, TDF or trusted data format is wrapped around it. So you know that everything I'm fitting into that model has been approved or authorized, and it's clean data for a clean output. So that's kind of where we see probably our greatest contribution into the AI space, is just making sure you get rid of the crap in, crap out. You can validate what's going in, and you can validate that the outputs that I'm getting.
Yeah.
This is especially important for, I think, defense and intelligence agencies that are making life and death decisions about operations. And it gives them a level of confidence that what they are making, if they start to use this in the OODA loop cycle, that the decisions that they're making are, no kidding, these are valid decisions. There's not untrusted data being utilized. They can confirm that I am getting, no kidding, good feedback based off of accurate data, and I can have confidence in whatever decision that I make in a battle space.
Hmm. Hmm. What do you think is the most common mistake that you see agencies make when they think that they have solved data sharing for coalition operations?
Oh, I don't think I've seen anybody who thinks they've solved the problem. I think everybody knows it's a problem. Everybody knows we don't share enough. There's a really funny story that we've got a gentleman named Jim Hockenhole that we've met with quite a bit, and he tells the story about how he put a briefing together. I think it was Jim Hockenhole, but he put a briefing together, sent it over, and by the time it had gone through all the different approval organizations, it ended up getting labeled as no foreign, and so he couldn't even brief the document that he produced, which
Yeah.
is insane. Like, he wrote it. So it's really funny. I think that this is something that, especially on the Five Eyes side, they're working very, very hard to try to figure out. But this is an area that I think that everybody understands that we've got a big problem with data sharing amongst nations. Sovereignty is also a huge thing. And so like as much I'm talking about the defense and intelligence space, the reality is that we've got equally as bad a problem on the commercial side. You've got, companies that are worried about IP protections. You've got, this is like I'm going to use BAE as an example. BAE is a company that's got, nodes all over the world. They're sharing IP, they're selling to foreign governments. They have the same type of data protection problems. Healthcare industry is really interesting as well. We started doing quite a bit of healthcare work with some of the with cancer clinics that are trying to solve how to find a cure for cancer.
Yeah.
These hospitals all have their own special and unique IP that they want to share data with other universities, but they don't want to give away the jewels, right? And so we're creating these data clean rooms for them. So that way everybody can kind of dump the data in, they can query against it, but they can't find root source data based off of it. So it gives them, levels of protection that their IP is protected, but these universities can still collaborate with each other to try to find a cure for cancer. And you're starting to see some really interesting, findings come out of this particular type of practice. And so you can kind of see it across the whole world. It's collaboration amongst nations, but it's collaboration between, you know, university hospitals, between defense industrial base companies, between anyone who does work across the globe. Like uh, global collaboration is actually this has been a problem that's been in the ecosystem for a very long time. So this is
Mm.
kind of technology that was born in the IC, has started to go to commercial, coming back to defense, and I could see it scaling into commercial again once we kind of get going.
Hmm. And what's next for Virtru? Now that you've been in the seat for 7 months, I believe.
Yeah, just about seven
What?
months now. We are really starting to kind of get our feet underneath us. I lead the global public sector team, so we're pressing super, super hard on trying to make sure that we've got partnerships with making sure we're enabling NATO, making sure that we're enabling the Five Eyes nations, making sure that we're working with some of the defense industrial based companies very, very closely so that way they can share and trade. You're seeing really interesting programs like the GCAP program. That one's fascinating because if you're familiar with the GCAP, that's the sixth generation fighter aircraft. It's the next gen fighter for it's being built by BAE, Leonardo, and Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, three different nations, three different companies that are kind of like taking the lead. Um, Amazing opportunity, but that kind of epitomizes the problem when you've got three different companies collaborating together, kind of all a little bit competing with each other a little bit. We're trying really hard to kind of get in there and show that we can really help you guys share data more quickly. If you look at the way that we share data on some of these large programs right now, it's mortifying. It's like save it on a disk or save it on a thumb drive, hop on an airplane, fly across the world, share the data, then do in reverse. It's very like we call it in the US, we call it sneakernet, because you're having to walk it over.
Hmm.
So getting past sneakernet to be able to move delivery timelines left is super important. We should be able to crank out large hardware end items orders of magnitude faster than we do,
Mm.
5 years ago, even today. We should be able to make this like much, much faster. So I think
Mm.
with what's next for Virtru, at least on the public sector side, really getting super deep into the ecosystems that are important for the public sector business, and on the commercial side, the ecosystems that enable the commercial sector. So that way we can bring them, some technologies that will make them operate faster, more securely, protect their IP, but give them opportunities to be able to accelerate to the max extent.
Okay. And wrapping this up, I want to ask you, what would you like the listeners to take from this episode? And where can people find you?
Well, yeah, you can Google search us. We're easy to find on virtru.com. So please, come reach out, let us know if you've got any needs that you need solved. I would say if I could leave people with one piece of one piece of thing to contemplate is protect the data at the data source. Think about security from a completely different lens. I sometimes say we have to throw the baby out with the bathwater right now. We've got very, very, very motivated adversaries out there that are super focused on trying to figure out how do they undermine every average everyday citizen. And I think the Virtru perspective, and granted I'm biased here, but I think the Virtru perspective actually really does apply to everyone. When I think about like my mother, who is, in her late 70s, vulnerable to, spamming and things like that, I would love to be able to put her in a position to have some type of like a reasonable protection, because what we're doing right now is creating orders of magnitude more vulnerable populations, and there are very few things on the data side that are sacred, and I think that Virtru can really help there. And it's a new day. Think about this. Think about security different.
Okay, well, thank you, Angel, for coming on to the podcast
For
and
sure.
sharing your thoughts.
Thanks, Nicholas. It was a great meeting you.